The pain of regret is always louder than the pain of letting go. At first, letting go feels like the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's uncomfortable, it's heavy, and it makes you question whether you're making the right decision. But over time, as the dust settles and the emotions lose their grip on you, something interesting happens. You start to see things clearly. You realize that what once felt unbearable was actually necessary. You begin to understand that letting go wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. And while you are stepping into a new chapter, the one who thought they could always have access to you is left behind, drowning in a sea of regret they never saw coming. Regret is a strange thing. It doesn't hit all at once. It sneaks up on a person when they least expect it. Maybe it starts with a memory, a flash of something familiar, a moment they took for granted. Maybe it's an old photo, a song playing on the radio, a certain smell in the air that brings back a time when they still had you in their life. But instead of feeling warmth, instead of feeling secure, they feel a pit in their stomach, an ache that reminds them of what they lost. It is then that they realize what they once had, and it is in that moment they understand that they can never have it again. The pain of regret is a slow burn. It doesn't leave quickly. It lingers. It eats away at the mind. It keeps a person awake at night, replaying everything they could have done differently. Regret is heavy because it's filled with the weight of missed opportunities, unspoken words, and actions that cannot be undone. It whispers in the quiet hours, in the spaces where distractions no longer work. It is in those silent moments that the one who took you for granted feels the full force of what they lost. At first, they may not even realize what's happening. They may go on with their life as if nothing has changed. They may even convince themselves that you were just another person, another temporary experience, nothing worth holding on to. But time has a way of revealing the truth. When the excitement of their distractions fades, when the noise around them settles, they start to feel the absence of your presence. They remember the way you cared, the way you listened, the way you showed up, even when they didn't deserve it. They remember how safe they felt with you, how much peace your presence brought into their life. And suddenly they are forced to face a reality they never considered before. You were not replaceable. That is when the regret truly begins to sink in. They start to wonder if they made a mistake. They ask themselves why they didn't appreciate you when they had the chance. They think about all the times they ignored you, dismissed your feelings, failed to see your worth. They recall the moments when you needed them, but they were too distracted to notice. And worst of all, they realize that while they were taking you for granted, you were slowly learning to live without them. But by the time they realize all of this, it's already too late. You have moved on. You have healed. You have built a life that no longer includes them. You have discovered a strength within yourself that they never expected you to find. And while they sit in silence, replaying their mistakes, you are too busy living to hear their cries. The pain of regret is relentless. It does not ease with time. It grows, it intensifies, it twists the knife deeper with every passing day. Because the truth is, people don't realize what they have until it's gone. They don't understand the value of someone until that person is no longer available to them. They think they have all the time in the world, that they can push you aside and come back when they're ready. But life doesn't work that way. People change, circumstances shift, and one day they wake up and find that the door they once walked through so easily is now permanently closed. And that is when they truly feel the weight of their choices. Not when you were crying, not when you were begging, not when you were hurting. No, they feel it when you've stopped waiting, when you've stopped looking back, when you've become unreachable. That is when they cry. Not in front of you, not where you can see, but in silence. Because the pain of regret is a lonely pain. It is the realization that they had something rare, something beautiful, something genuine, and they let it slip away. And now they must live with the knowledge that someone else will experience what they were too blind to appreciate. Silence is one of the most powerful forces in the world. It doesn't need to be explained, justified, or announced. It speaks in a way that words never could. It carries a message so loud that the person on the receiving end has no choice but to hear it, even if they don't want to. When you choose silence, you are making a statement. You are saying, without saying a word, that you are no longer available to be used, manipulated, or taken for granted. And that message, that absence, that void where you used to be, will echo louder than any argument, any confrontation, or any attempt to seek closure. At first, they won't understand. They'll assume you're just being dramatic, that you'll come back, that you'll break the silence like you always have. They might even try to provoke you, reach out, or do something to test whether you still care. But when they realize you are no longer responding, no longer feeding the cycle, no longer playing the role they expected you to play, that is when reality sets in. That is when the silence becomes deafening. That is when it starts to haunt them. Because silence forces a person to sit with themselves. It strips away the distractions, the excuses, the justifications. It leaves them alone with their thoughts, their mistakes, and the longer the silence lasts, the louder their own mind becomes. They start replaying everything that happened, every word that was said, every time they dismissed your feelings, ignored your efforts, or made you feel like you didn't matter. They hear the echoes of your absence in the spaces where you used to be. They feel the weight of the void they created by not valuing you when they had the chance. Silence exposes people. It reveals who they really are, how much they truly valued you, and whether they were ever willing to do the work to keep you in their life. If they never cared, they will move on without a second thought. But if they did care, if they did take you for granted, if they did assume you'd always be there, then silence becomes their greatest torment. Because now they are left with nothing but their own thoughts, their own guilt, their own regrets. And there is no escaping that. They might try to replace you, distract themselves, act as if your absence doesn't bother them, but deep down they feel it. Every time they look at their phone and see no messages from you, every time they go about their day and don't hear your voice, every time they remember how easy it used to be to reach you, but now realize they no longer have that access, something inside them shifts. They start to understand too late that you were not as easy to replace as they once believed. Silence is a mirror. It forces a person to see themselves exactly as they are. When you stop engaging, stop explaining, stop giving them chances to correct their mistakes, you are holding up a mirror to their behavior. And for some people, that reflection is unbearable. They can no longer deny the damage they caused, the way they treated you, the way they pushed you away. They must now sit with the consequences of their own actions. And that is when the panic sets in. They realize that silence is not just a temporary reaction, it is a decision. A decision that you have made for yourself. A decision that says, I am done explaining my worth to someone who refuses to see it. They may try to reach out, test the waters, send a message just to see if you'll respond. But when they are met with silence, when they see that you are no longer giving them your energy, that is when they start to feel the weight of what they lost. The absence of your words becomes the loudest thing in their life. They may never admit it, they may never say it out loud, but they feel it. They hear it in every quiet moment, in every space where your voice used to be. Because silence doesn't just communicate distance, it communicates finality. And when someone finally understands that they no longer have the privilege of hearing from you, it becomes the most painful sound they've ever heard. There comes a moment when everything shifts. A moment when the pain, the disappointment, the endless cycles of hoping and waiting no longer hold power over you. At first, it doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like exhaustion. You grow tired of explaining yourself, tired of waiting for someone to change, tired of hoping They will finally see your worth. And in that exhaustion, something remarkable happens. You begin to detach. Detachment isn't instant. It creeps in slowly, almost unnoticeably. One day, their words don't sting as much. The things that used to make you anxious, the delayed replies, the mixed signals, the inconsistency, no longer send you into a spiral. You stop overanalyzing their actions. Stop making excuses for their behavior. Stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. Because suddenly, you realize that none of it was ever about you. It was about them. Their inability to appreciate you, their unwillingness to meet you where you deserve to be met, their failure to recognize your value before it was too late. And once you truly grasp that, you begin to move differently. You stop overextending yourself for people who wouldn't do the same for you. You stop prioritizing those who only see you as an option. You stop trying to prove your worth to someone who should have seen it from the start. Detachment isn't bitterness, it's clarity. It's the realization that you were never meant to beg for someone's attention, affection, or effort. It's understanding that real love, real respect, real appreciation is freely given, not something you have to chase. As you step into this new mindset, something interesting happens. The person who once dismissed you, who assumed you would always be there, starts to notice the shift. At first, they don't believe it. They assume you're just giving them the silent treatment, that you'll eventually come back, that your detachment is just a phase. But as time goes on, as you continue to choose yourself, they begin to feel it. The absence of your energy, your kindness, your presence. It starts to sink in. They begin to wonder why you're no longer reacting, why you're no longer reaching out, why your attention has drifted elsewhere. And in that wondering, something else starts to settle in. Regret. Not because they suddenly became a better person, not because they've changed, but because they finally realize what they lost. They start to see all the things they took for granted. The good morning texts, the way you always checked in on them, the way you supported them when no one else did. They start to miss the comfort of knowing you were always there. And the worst part for them, they know deep down that they were the reason you left. But by then, you're no longer available to ease their guilt. You've detached so much that their regret no longer affects you. You no longer seek their validation, no longer need their explanations, no longer crave their presence. You have stepped into your power. And that power lies in knowing you deserve better. Detachment isn't about revenge. It's not about making them suffer. It's about reclaiming your peace. It's about realizing that you don't need closure from them. You just need to decide that you are done. And when that decision is made, there is no going back. Because once you have seen your own worth, once you have felt the peace that comes with no longer chasing someone who doesn't value you, you will never settle for less again. And that is the moment they begin to cry in silence. Not because they want to change, but because they know they can't undo the damage they caused. They cry for the person they thought would always be there, the love they assumed they could take for granted. They cry because they finally see the truth. You were the rarest thing they ever had, and now you are gone. There comes a point when you stop waiting for an apology that will never come. A moment when you realize that closure isn't something you get from someone else. It's something you give yourself. At first, it's difficult. The mind craves explanation. It wants to understand. It seeks answers to questions that may never be addressed. Why did they do this? Why didn't they fight for you? Why didn't they appreciate you when they had the chance? These thoughts run in circles, keeping you trapped in a loop of pain, replaying conversations, analyzing moments, hoping that somehow, in the endless dissection of what happened, you'll find the one missing piece that will make it all make sense, but you never do. Because the truth is, not everything is meant to be understood. Some people leave your life not because you weren't enough, not because you didn't do enough, but because they were never capable of valuing you in the first place. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you free yourself from the chains of overthinking. Healing begins the moment you decide to stop looking back. It's a process, not an event. Some days you feel strong, indifferent, as if you've finally moved on. Then there are days when a memory resurfaces, a song plays, a familiar scent lingers in the air, and suddenly you're right back where you started, feeling everything all over again. But here's what you must understand. Healing isn't linear. It doesn't mean you erase the past or forget what happened. It means you learn to live without being controlled by it. One of the hardest parts of healing is resisting the urge to reach out, to seek closure, to get that final conversation that will make it all make sense. But deep down, you know the truth. You don't need that conversation. You don't need their words to move forward. Because real closure doesn't come from what they say. It comes from what you decide. You decide that you deserve peace. You decide that you won't allow someone else's actions to define your worth. You decide that you are worthy of love that doesn't leave you confused, hurt, or questioning yourself. The moment you stop chasing answers is the moment you reclaim your power, because chasing closure is just another way of holding on. It's a way of keeping the door open, of allowing someone who hurt you to continue taking up space in your mind, your heart, your energy. And they don't deserve that space. Not anymore. They will feel the shift. They will notice that you are no longer reacting, no longer waiting, no longer tied to them emotionally. And that realization will hit them harder than any words ever could, because for the first time they will understand that they no longer have access to you. Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. That is the true loss. There will be a moment when they sit in their own silence, scrolling through old conversations, replaying moments in their mind, realizing too late that they had something rare, something irreplaceable, and they will cry, not in front of anyone, not where the world can see, but in silence, because deep down they will know that their actions led to this, that they were the reason you walked away. And the most painful part, they will realize there is nothing they can do to fix it. But by then, you will have already moved on. Not because you stopped caring, not because it didn't hurt, but because you finally understood that you were never meant to spend your life waiting for someone to realize your worth. You were meant for more. And that realization is what will set you free. There comes a moment when everything shifts. Not in the loud, dramatic way that movies portray, but in a quiet, almost unnoticeable way. It's the moment when you wake up and no longer feel the weight of their absence pressing on your chest. The moment when you realize you didn't check your phone hoping for a message that will never come. The moment when you understand on a deep, unshakable level that you don't need their validation anymore. At first it feels strange, almost unsettling. After spending so long wrapped up in someone else's energy, their approval, their attention, their absence, learning to exist without them feels unfamiliar. There was a time when they occupied your thoughts from morning to night, when their words shaped your mood, when their actions determined whether you felt wanted or discarded. Now, as their presence fades into the background, you begin to see yourself in a new light. It doesn't happen all at once. Healing never does. There are days when you feel like you've conquered it all, like you've outgrown them completely. And then there are days when something triggers a memory, a place, a phrase, a scent. And for a moment, the past tries to pull you back. But the difference now is that you don't stay there. You don't drown in it. You feel it, acknowledge it, and then you let it pass, because you are no longer attached to the illusion of what could have been. You begin to rebuild yourself piece by piece, not in a desperate attempt to make them regret losing you, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply because you owe it to yourself to become everything they failed to appreciate. You start pouring your energy into things that make you feel alive. Your goals, your passions, your self-care, your future. And in doing so, you discover a version of yourself that you almost lost in the process of loving someone who didn't know how to love you back. This transformation doesn't go unnoticed. They see it, they feel it. They might not say it, but they sense the shift in your energy. And it unsettles them, because once upon a time they were certain you would always be there. Always waiting, always hoping they would change. They believed their place in your life was secure, that no matter how many times they left, you would always welcome them back. But now, for the first time, they realize that their absence no longer affects you the way it once did. That realization is what keeps them up at night. They replay the moments when they should have been better, when they should have appreciated you, when they should have fought for you. They scroll through old messages, wondering if they could say something, anything, to undo the damage. But deep down, they know the truth. They know that even if they reached out, it wouldn't be the same, because you have changed. You are no longer the person they walked away from. They cry in silence, not because they miss you, but because they miss the version of you that loved them unconditionally. They miss the security of knowing they had your heart, your patience, your forgiveness. And now that it's gone, they are left to sit with the consequences of their own actions. But you don't wait for them to realize your worth. You don't need their regret as validation, because the most powerful thing you ever did was walk away, not with anger, not with resentment, but with a quiet understanding that you deserve more. And that realization is what makes you unstoppable. There comes a time when silence becomes your greatest weapon. Not the kind of silence that begs for attention, not the silence that hopes they notice your absence, but the kind of silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. This silence is not empty, it is full. Full of growth, full of self-respect, full of unshakable confidence in who you are and what you deserve. It is the silence of someone who no longer seeks validation from those who fail to value them. At first, this silence is unfamiliar. When you have spent so much time explaining yourself, proving your worth, waiting for them to see you the way you saw them, the idea of pulling back, of saying nothing, of simply existing without their acknowledgement feels foreign. But slowly you realize something. Your silence forces them to confront themselves. When you stop chasing, when you stop reacting, when you stop engaging in the cycle of emotional highs and lows, they are left with nothing but their own thoughts. And that is where the real battle begins. Not for you, but for them. They start to wonder. At first, they assume you'll come back just like you always did. They believe their hold over you is still strong, that they still occupy your mind the way they used to. But as the days pass, as the messages go unanswered, as they see you thriving in ways they never imagined, a seed of doubt begins to grow. They replay conversations, trying to pinpoint the moment you stopped caring. They scroll through your pictures, looking for signs that you're struggling without them. But instead, they see someone at peace, someone moving forward, someone who has learned to find happiness without their presence. And that is when regret sets in. Not because they have changed, not because they suddenly learned how to love you the way you deserved, but because they have lost control. They were used to the power they held. The power to make you feel unworthy, the power to keep you questioning yourself, the power to disappear and return whenever it suited them. But now, that power is gone. And the loss of control terrifies them. They won't show it, of course. People like this never do. Instead, they will pretend they don't care. They will post things to make it seem like they are unbothered, as if they have moved on effortlessly. But deep down, they are drowning in the silence you left behind. Because silence does what words cannot. It forces people to face themselves. Without the distraction of arguments, without the reassurance of your presence, they are left to sit with the weight of their own choices. They will remember the times you forgave them when they didn't deserve it, the times you stayed up waiting for a message that never came, the times you swallowed your pain just to keep the connection alive. And for the first time, they will realize that you were the one thing in their life they should have never taken for granted. But by then, it will be too late. Because silence doesn't just make them miss you, it makes them understand that they will never have access to you in the same way again. They may reach out, testing the waters, trying to see if there's still a way back in, but they will find a different version of you. One that is no longer emotionally available for their games. One that no longer needs their half-hearted apologies. One that has built a life so full, so complete, that their absence no longer leaves a void. And this is the greatest revenge. Not bitterness, not retaliation, not trying to make them feel the pain they caused you, but becoming so untouchable, so free, that their regret becomes their own burden to bear. Because the moment you stop proving yourself, the moment you embrace the power of your silence, is the moment you win.